The Owl House as a whole is a great show, but both season 1 and season 3 have many flaws. Season 2 is special though. It has one boring-ish episode, but 20 that are just amazing. Throughout the season, we meet new characters, discover new plots, and break all of our characters, pushing them into the struggles that you can't even imagine. Season 2 has themes that are shown throughout the show, has a consistency of trauma that helps separates our heroes from our villains. The show isn't the fun adventures anymore. It becomes much darker and much more challenging for our characters to move forward. King's Tide, the season 2 finale, turns 1 year old today, and now that we have season 3 and are a year out from season 2, I feel like it's the perfect time to do a deep dive into all that happens in season 2 of The Owl House. Both the first and final episode of the Owl House season 2 end with the word tide in the title. The first episode is Separate Tides, and the other one is King's Tide. And if you take that first word and the of both, you get Separate Kings, a great descriptor for this season. In his most literal interpretation, King and his father are separated, as well as Bellows and the Corrector. In each relationship, one person knows that they will not reunite, but in the end, someone from the other group frees them. I like this way of looking at the name, but the interpretation only affects 4 of our characters in the show, one of whom doesn't even show up in the season, and it isn't really something you should name the title for a season after. I much prefer the more figurative way of looking at the name. I like to see Separate Kings much more as 2 people in some sort of relationship who can't or don't see each other, possibly even can't connect emotionally, and we have many more of these examples. For this, we have Philip and Caleb, Luz and Camila, Ida and Del, King and the Titan, Hunter and Bellows, Amity and her parents, Ida and Rain, Luz and Amity, Lilith and Hootie. All the earlier relationships are closed off at one point or another, and each one has a different meaning. Bellows killed Caleb, yet due to Philip's hero complex, he blames his brother and tries to make perfect clones in the Grimwalkers, but both because of the emotional baggage and the Grimwalkers keep betraying Bellows, he will never be able to reunite with his brother, at least the brother that he wants. At the end of season 1, Luz blows up the portal back to the human realm, while before she was separated from her mom. She could have gone back through the portal and visited her. But now, there is no connection. They are truly separated, being only able to communicate through the reflection until the final scene, where Luz's friends are separated from their family. When Ida was younger, she had just gotten the curse. She had accidentally attacked her father. Due to the incident, her father could never carve another talisman, and fearing her father, she runs away until they finally reconcile in Elsewhere and Elsewhere. As baby, King was left alone in a castle, with only statues to protect him, and Ida quickly rescued him, leaving any trace of his heritage behind. He wants nothing more than to find his father and to know who he is, but by finding out what type of creature King is, he realizes he will never be able to meet his father alive and will need to live the rest of his life on his father's corpse. Hunter and Bellows happens late in the season. Hunter is trying to defend his uncle but gets trapped in the mind, and due to that, what he finds, Bellows is ready to kill his nephew once again. Amity's mother is a manipulative person who mistreats everyone just so she can get ahead of the rest, and Amity's father is too scared to say anything. Amity separates from her parents when she meets people who care about her, who will protect her, in Luz, Willow, and Gus. Ida and Rain as kids were thick as thieves, then they dated, but due to the owl beast, Ida pushed Rain away. They reunited during their time in the past, but were once again separated due to the resistance. They both tried to protect each other, and in the end, they did reunite. Luz and Amity spent the first half of season 1 both liking each other, but too scared to do anything, fear and rejection. The fear separates them, and it takes Hootie to get them together. Lilith and Hootie, the best of friends, are torn apart due to missions trying to protect each other. Both go one note. Interesting, but underdeveloped characters in the previous season, and go to realized people with emotions in this season, mainly because of their friendship, but the characters gets separated. Separation means different things to each relationship. Whether there's a physical, emotional, mental, safety, or existence boundary, all these characters are forced to be apart. While some get to connect once more, like Luz Camila, Eden Dell, Amity Alador, Rain and Ida, Lumity, Lilith and Hootie, some can't reunite. Separate Kings is a perfect title for season 2, and if that name hint wasn't intentional, I'd be shocked because it fits so well with what we have seen. I'm sure the most diehard fans of the Owl House have heard the concept of breaking the fantasy introduced by Man of 1000 Thoughts in one of his videos. The concept is about season 2 of the Owl House, and the show stops just being the fun adventures, but characters facing their emotional scars or deep fear, insecurities. But the term mainly refers to the fantasy genre, breaking that. It's not the fun adventures, it gets serious. But after rewatching the show, breaking the fantasy also applies to the characters and their perceptions of their identity, and how the identity affects those around them. As for characters it affects, Luz, King, Ida, Lilith, Amity, Gus, Willow, Bellows, Hunter, Gwendolyn, Odalia, and Hooty. And for the characters that how they're viewed, Amity and Willow, Luz and Hunter, Boy Isles and Bellows, Hunter and Bellows, Gwen and Lilith. In each of the previous examples, the characters have a fantasy about how they perceive themselves or others. There is an extreme perspective on reality, which is sometimes completely wrong. Luz thinks she is hurting Ida. King thinks he's a fallen king, then he thinks he's a Titan trapper. Ida thinks she ruined her father's life. Lilith won't go to the power. She won't let go of the power she once held. Amity still fears rejection. Gus thinks he's dumb. Willow thinks she is weak. Bellows thinks he's a hero. Hunter thinks he's doing what's right. Gwen thinks she's helping her daughters. Odalia thinks she is helping her family. Hooty thinks he isn't helpful. Amity thinks Willow is still weak. Luz thinks that Hunter is unequivocally evil. The people of Boiling Isles thinks Bellows is a great person. Hunter thinks Bellows is a good person. Gwen thinks that Lilith can be completely self-sustaining. Each character has a lie or something about their identity that holds them back. But whether they choose to accept the lie or see through it separates the heroes from the villains. But this is one of the most basic rules of character development, and it's done very well here. Some of my favorite examples, like I said earlier, are the Bellows, Gwen, Hooty, Luz and Hunter, Boiling Isles and Bellows, Hunter and Bellows. For Bellows and Philip, he's a man from another world thrown into this new world. We know that Bellows killed his brother after entering the Boiling Isles, but then he must have been trapped. And although he did look for a way out, he also always prioritized finding a way to kill other witches. While if he only focused on finding a way home, he could have done it quickly, and his mission to eradicate witches kept him staying on the Boiling Isles for longer and longer, causing him to lose more and more humanity as he ate more and more palisman. Yet he clung to the idea that he was human. That gives him more humanity than the witches, and because of that, the witches need to die. Bellows needed to kill the witches so he could be a hero, which would have him win a triumph for humanity, giving him more humanity, which is what he wanted. Bellows didn't just want to be human, he wanted to be the most human, the best, the hero, and by trying to become that, he loses humanity, yet clings to the lie that how far he's fallen is actually how far he has risen. Gwen thinks she is helping her daughters by forcing herself in, but she says, "I'm just a mother trying to help her daughter." That line is Gwendolyn's biggest lie, and she doesn't even realize it. She claims she wants to help her daughter, but that statement clearly shows the opposite. She says daughter, although having two daughters with a curse, yet she only pays attention to one of them. In reality, she wants to be the best mother, to be helpful, but on her quest, she fails right out of the gate because she only ever focuses on helping one of her daughters. Luckily, though, she does realize her mistake by the end of the episode she is introduced. Hooty questions his role in the Owl family, which sets into the motions the events of knocking on Hooty's door. He thinks that he has a role he needs to play, a purpose, as we see throughout the episode. At the end, he realizes he best serves everyone as a part of the family, not a tool. The relationship between Luz and Hunter is also extremely interesting. Luz was certain by the point she met Hunter that Bellows was evil. Lilith worked for him, but she stopped. She was redeemed, being fairly black and white. But with Hunter, things are much more complex. Luz says the only reason she is with Hunter is because she wants to help people, and that's true. It doesn't seem like the only reason. She originally thought Hunter was a horrible person like Bellows, but she had a black and white view on the world. There are good people. There are bad people. Weirdos need to stick together, and villains also would need to stick together. She was wrong, but she tried to deny that, not ready to change her whole perspective on the world. It wasn't until she spent a lot more time with Hunter and hunting palisman where she changed her mind. We can see this when she describes Hunter as
a beat-up blonde with no magical powers. She called him, and these are her words, a bad but sad boy.
both hilarious and shows that Luz is beginning to understand a more complex world where people have more depth than just being good or being bad for what they have done and who they associate with. The Boiling Isles is an interesting relationship because although living in the Boiling Isles for about 350 years, Bellows was only emperor for 50 of those years, and his control over the Isles was complete in that time. We see how he does it with a mock-up in the episode Them's the Breaks Kid, where Terra's game of Covens versus Wild shows how people would lose their morals, friendships, and conscience for some greater reward like Bellows promised. It showed that Bellows didn't conquer the Isles, but that they submitted, or at the very least, many of the inhabitants ensured that Bellows could take over, and left the resistors or outcasts as criminals. But because of their role in besieging the Boiling Isles for Bellows, they can't come to terms with Bellows being evil, because if they helped the Emperor, then they're either oblivious weaklings, or they're evil themselves. To call out Bellows is to call out themselves, and just like Bellows, in Luz's perception, they need to be heroes, and an association with a bad guy would make them bad as well in their head. Finally, we have Hunter and Bellows, which might be the most interesting relationship. Bellows isn't just Hunter's uncle, he's an abuser and a core part of Hunter's identity. Bellows is the last member of Hunter's family, and due to that, and a few other things, Hunter is reliant on Bellows. One of my favorite examples of this is how Hunter is tricked into being reliant on Bellows is his staff. Hunter thinks he can't make any magic, so he needs to use Bellows' artificial magic. But later in the show, we see Hunter use magic with Flapjack. I am sure Bellows knew that Hunter could have performed magic using talisman, but if Hunter only knew how to use artificial magic, he would need Bellows to perform magic. He would need Bellows' staff. He would be reliant on Bellows. Bellows created Hunter and filled his mind with propaganda since the day he was born. Throughout the show, Hunter wore the Golden Guard sigil and continued to believe this propaganda, but in hollow mind. When he learned all the propaganda was fake, all that Bellows told him was a lie, the moment he left Bellows' mind, he threw the cape with the Golden Guard sigil onto the floor. It is no coincidence that the moment Hunter realized he was lied to was when he was redeemed. In Labyrinth Runners, actually, this is Hunter in Labyrinth Runners. Just forget the Hootie pin, but I think it's a good costume. I really liked the outfit in the show. Anyways, in Labyrinth Runners, although Hunter was standoffish to Gus, he didn't hesitate to fight the Coven Scouts, and by the end of the episode, he cemented his place both as a hero and as a Hexolio. As any storyteller knows, for a character arc or anti-character arc to work, your character needs to believe a lie about themselves or others. But with Yahoo Season 2, it goes beyond a lie, and it goes into a fantasy. It is a fantasy that King wants to be king. It wasn't an actual lie, but a larger-than-life story made up in his head. Bellows had to be perfect, or all his followers would be evil. They weren't lying to themselves that Bellows was evil. They created a fantasy where he was a hero. It was perfect for a show that started out as a larger-than-life adventure, a fantasy, that the characters' lives would be larger than life and would become fantasies. And it makes the bigger the victory to fight your way through the lies, through the fantasies, as our heroes do. As I've previously mentioned, in Season 2 of The Owl House, the line between hero and protagonist gets blurred. First impressions of all the new characters seem to always be incorrect, and categorizing a character just based on their first scene becomes impossible. This blurring of the line affects our main characters and their view on themselves. They all have issues, and they start to think that they themselves are the monster. Although this topic sounds similar to the characters' fantasies, there are some big differences. Look at King, Ida, Lilith, Hootie, Hunter, or Bellows. They all have things that make them different from everyone else that could be dangerous. King is a Titan and is feared by the Titan Trappers. Lilith and Ida have their albies. Hootie is a tube demon who no one understands nor wants to be with. Hunter is a Grimwalker, and Bellows can turn into a Palisman monster. And for Luz, although she can't turn into a monster herself, she thinks she is hurting everyone around her, whether it's at the petrification ceremony, finding out that she taught Philip a new glyph, or any other example. Something of note is that people who accept the inner monster as a part of themselves gain power and strength from the inner monster, while those who don't, like Bellows, are weakened because of it. And this goes back to one of Bellows' lies for me. He thinks he is a saint. He thinks he is more human than the rest of people and demons. In Hollow Mind, he says the Palisman monster is not a part of him. It's a different entity. It's an annoyance, something alien to his mind. But that same monster is what Bellows ends up becoming when he loses his shape. In the end, by not accepting that Palisman monster as part of himself, he ended up losing more of himself to the beast and ended up becoming even less human. And then look at those who accepted. They got great powers. Ida became Harpy Ida. Hooty became a best friend. King got his super wham! While Luz and Hunter didn't get an ability, they got clarity of mind and a greater understanding of himself, which would help in the future. Accepting yourself is one of the Owl House's biggest themes, and it means to accept every part of yourself, both your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to find ways to both work with others and trust yourself. It's the same thing. We were just talking about characters' lies. This is a different subject. As things get more and more dangerous throughout the show, more and more drastic measures are being taken by every character. It seems everyone is lying to each other so they can protect them. It is only natural, but tiny rifts begin to form, and it blurs that line of white and black even more. Some examples of this throughout the show is Luz lying to King about believing his backstory, Rain pretending to forget about the events in Ida's Requiem, Luz lying about visiting her mother, Luz lying to Amity about in reaching out, and Ida having a plan, an Otane worked out, Bellows, 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 and Bellows. In each of these situations, the character telling a lie is merely trying to be nice to another person to protect them from information, or to use that to lie to the person. The lies come out of a place of nobility, but are very problematic. While there isn't any long-lasting loss of trust between the characters, it does seem to affect the characters telling the lie. Without getting into it too much, in season 3, Luz has a feeling of hurting those around her. That intensifies greatly, and I think a lot of that has to do with the lies she tells in this season. Earlier, we discussed the character's fantasy or their lie, and how they lie to others is one of their inner lies. They say they're lying to help someone else, but in reality, it's more often than not to avoid something uncomfortable. Luz constantly lied about things, saying it's to make the other person feel better, King being a king, visiting her mother, or fighting the Abomaton. But in each of these situations, she's avoiding confrontation, and that just makes the truth even more painful. Lies like these are just as bad as Bellows' lies, even if they're not intentional. Bellows lies to further his agenda, and while that agenda is worse than what Luz tries to accomplish, in both cases, they are bending another's will with the use of lies. Luz isn't as bad as Bellows by any means, but she is definitely using many of the same tactics, even if it is for less evil reasons. The tactics are the same, and they can have the same damage. It is a warning that anyone can fall into darkness. Taking the easy path when it comes to other people is a dangerous game. Even if you think you're going to help them, when it comes to the safety of others, they need to be involved, and you aren't the only one responsible for it. As just mentioned, the path of darkness is easy to journey on to. The difference between noble and evil can become blurred quickly depending on the actions that you take. They show us the fall of others through our heroes and what mistakes they echo, and what they observe and learn from the villains of the past. We just talked about how trying to help someone without their consent can be very dangerous, and that is a big part of Philip's fall. And for this, I'm going to try to only use knowledge available to us before or during season 3, none of the season 3 flashback stuff. Philip had a brother who he killed, and in some way that's related to the Boiling Islands. Bellows thought he was going to save Kayla and tried to bring him back with Grimwalkers, but each Grimwalker was wrong in some way, and Philip kept killing him. Bellows would lie to each new Grimwalker, thinking maybe he could save this one, even though he was the one destroying them. He used the Grimwalkers as well as various other people in the Boiling Isles, using them for nefarious deeds, working to commit genocide with them, leading them to their death. But to him, his deed is noble, his cause is noble, and if someone wouldn't stand with him, they must be faulty, they must be wrong, they must be against him. My favorite example of this is, again, Hollow Mind. Philip asks Luz to join him, but she denies, and after that one shallow attempt, he says, well, you can't reason with crazy, and tries to kill her 5 seconds after asking her to be an ally. And with Luz earlier in the season, she has that same mentality. The Golden Guard is with Bellows, so he is evil, and if you are on the side with her, then you are a saint. She won't try to kill those that don't agree with her, like Bellows, but she thinks that her side is the only one that could be right. Another one of my favorite examples of how Bellows took over, I already briefly mentioned. In Them's the Breaks Kids, we see that game of Covens versus Wilds. The kids desperately desire to come home with a ribbon for one reason or another, and to do that, they need to join a gang and turn on their fellow kids, on their fellow classmates. And this is exactly what Bellows does. It's even shown at the start of the next episode. At the beginning of Hollow Mind, probably the example I'm using most in this episode, one of Ida's most trusted vendors refuses to sell to Ida anymore. She joins a coven wanting to be part of Bellows' new paradise and to avoid eradication. There is no other possible way for Bellows to gain complete control in 50 years without the aid of the people. But it is the fact that we get it represented with children that is so dark, and that's one of the reasons that Terra Snapdragon is so great. In various episodes of Season 2, we see Lilith as a suck-up. Whether it is to King or any other authority figure, she grovels and is easily tricked, showing how she became one of Bellows' puppets and probably how other Bellows puppets became Bellows puppets. She was chasing the power, and she succumbed so easily. This is what happens with all of Bellows' followers. At the Titan's Head and King's Tide, the Coven heads didn't fight because they thought Bellows wasn't necessarily a great person. They were chasing what he promised them. They were chasing a better future where they were like gods. Look at Kikimora. She was ready to run away from Bellows, thinking his treatment was abusive and unfair. Yet when she heard she'd get a promotion, she immediately stopped caring about the whole reason that she wanted to leave. I love how they told us Bellows' backstory without ever showing it to us directly. They gave us, the audience, as well as our protagonist, an idea just how evil Bellows was. And that's just such an ingrained inclusion, as well as how other evil characters became evil. Owl House Season 2 is something truly special. Its characters and plots are so interesting and are so well intertwined. It is nearly perfect, with only one lacking episode and 20 plots that are bangers. Something that does need to be mentioned is that the cancellation of Season 3 of The Owl House. Midway through Season 2 of The Owl House, it was announced that the third season would be cancelled, but the creator, Donna Terrace, knew that by the end of Season 1. This, of course, affected Season 2 of The Owl House. We'll never know if it's for the better or for the worse. If giving Season 2 a bit more time to breathe would have made it better, or if rearranging the arcs would have given us something even better. There's no way of knowing. Either way, though, this season was essential in making The Owl House work. This season carries the burden of ending the show properly, and so that Season 3 can work, in my opinion. Because here, you need to tie up all the setup plot points into a nice bow and dress them up so it can be handled as well as possible in Season 3. They need to be careful with what they included so Season 3 wouldn't be completely overloaded. But with that, in my opinion, Season 2 looks even better from my perspective. They had an impossible task, yet handled it so gracefully. The season is amazing on its own, but knowing the pressure and the rewrites that must have occurred makes it even better. So thank you to the cast and the creators and the crew of The Owl House. You saved this show in an unsalvageable location and created one of the best seasons of animated television, or even just seasons of television I have seen. Thank you for introducing to me new characters like Hunter, Rain, while mixing in old characters into new and exciting plots. You made The Owl House Season 2 perfect. Anyways, though, That's all I have to say. Anyways, what do you think about season 2 of The Owl House? I didn't want to go over every individual episode here, as I briefly did that in another video, and I'm planning to go in depth on certain episodes in the future, so stay tuned for that. As always, I like to throw in a bit of trivia at the end, so what episode from season 2 do we find out the name of Tanella Sonoza, this character? Let me know if you remember. While season 2 of The Owl House is fantastic, how good each episode is, and how that compares to the episodes of season 1 and season 3 is also quite interesting. And if you want to check out my reasoning for every episode of The Owl House, its ranking, check out this video. Subscribe for more videos about The Owl House, Amphibia, Gravity Falls, and Disney's newest show, Haley's on It. Thanks for watching. I have been Fictional Fanatic Dressed Up as Hunter, and I will see you in the next one, so bye!